Hey guys, welcome back to the course. In the last lecture, we talked about imagining the future and using a framework and a rhetorical question that Peter Thiel, very famous investor, uses often. In that thought experiment, what we did is we imagined the future, and then we imagined what's happening in the future, or so we think, and then we go backwards and think, what in the future is simply not being seeded right now, and it should be being seeded. This thought experiment is the exact inverse of that, and it's a lot more fun. Okay, you ready for this one? I'll explain the context a little bit just to get you in the right mindset for how you should tackle this one. You know when you're on the computer and maybe you run into a BuzzFeed article, or maybe someone shows you something from the past that you're very nostalgic about. When you watch, say, commercials from the 80s or 90s, or you see the news that happened 20, 30 years ago and you cringe. Why do you cringe? Well, because hindsight is such that when you're looking at the past, it's very often that you think that we did things in the past in an ignorant way or in a silly, inefficient fashion. When you look back at the past and you look at those lists of things that were popular, what makes you say this was stupid? There are a lot of things that you have a reaction to, and you have a visceral reaction that's negative when you think about the 80s or the 90s or even the 70s, just depending on how old you are. So an example could be, I think it's ridiculous that we used to use this. I think it's ridiculous that we used to think this was popular or cool. Or you think it's ridiculous that we thought something was cutting edge back then. Okay, so that's just to get you a feel for how this kind of works. Right now we're standing in the present, we're looking back at the future, thinking about what was dumb or from our perspective now is silly. Okay, now imagine you're in the future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, even 50 years. If you're in the future, what today would you be looking back at and cringing at? What seems really unnecessary and what seems really dumb? Now, this is really gonna rack your brain. It's really gonna have to stretch your creativity, but it's worth doing. Lots of entrepreneurs have used this technique to come up with business ideas. PayPal actually was based kind of on the same premise that they thought it was silly that we couldn't transfer money through the internet. So try to imagine today, what's something that we use on an everyday basis that's just unnecessary? So try to do that at home. Try to look around the room and see if there's anything you think of, if you actually focus on that one item, seems ridiculous. I think it's incredibly weird that we still use physical credit cards. Because if you think about it, it's very normal. Everyone uses credit cards, right? But if you actually break down what this does, it is a physical piece of plastic that holds 16 digits. And in your Stripe also holds 16 digits. That's all it is a physical card to remind you of what the code is to get money out of your bank. It just seems like there are so many other ways of doing that. And I'm not necessarily talking about just like Apple Pay. So that's something that I think is incredibly strange. I think that when we look back, we'll think that carrying around a plastic card with really basic information on it, just the physicality of it, the fact that I have to physically carry this thing, just seems so dumb. So that's something I think that's going to change in the future. And if I honestly believe that, which I do, then I can imagine a lot of different business opportunities that are going to follow that trend. And if I'm ahead of the curve, then I can build something that could be potentially large. Okay guys, so try that one out. Try thinking about it, and if you need some inspiration, go and search things like 35 ridiculous things from the 90s, or try to look at old commercials from the 80s and 70s and things like that, and you'll look at it and you'll get some inspiration, right? You'll notice things that you totally forgot about, right? Like